Reconnect.
Hello. Here we go. We're live.
This is Cinematic Rapid Trail, episode 4.
While we're recording here first.
Hello. Welcome to Cinematic Rapid Trails, episode 4. All right. We're also going Facebook Live, so that's fun. Cool.
Well, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'm David.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Jerry.
And welcome to Cinematic Rapid Trails, where we talk about great ideas because great ideas are worth pursuing.
Yes.
Or exploring. So the movie for tonight we just watched was Interstellar. To quickly give you a short synopsis of the film. So humanity is at the breaking point where crops are failing, dust is everywhere, and now it's time for us to try to leave Earth and trying to find other homes to inhabit. And so what happens is Matthew McConaughey is a mechanic, astronaut, and he's commissioned by NASA, who's now working secretly, to be part of an exploration team to find these other worlds. And of course the story is more complicated than that, but it's definitely humanity exploring other worlds, and the movie does a great job with exploring themes, relativity, gravity, love, and then some other things we'll get into as well. But that's the spoiler-free summary of that. So beyond that, you have been warned, there will be spoilers, because we really can't talk about the film without talking about what happens in the film. So that's pretty much the film. Definitely go ahead and watch it. Definitely some great emotional there's some great acting, some amazing score.
Oh, yes.
And
It's my number one favorite movie of all time at this point in history. We'll see where it goes.
Right.
With all these sequels coming out, though, fat chance it's going to be beat. We just have too many sequels and remakes. Just like, not likely it's going to be beat for a while.
Well, we were joking how we're like, wow, this is almost like what we were saying. This is almost like a precursor, a prequel to, and the only thing we're talking about is we're only missing Morgan Freeman to play the Black Dude. And you know, this is how Batman gets all his gadgets. It's secretly NASA designing all the tech for Batman.
Exactly.
Right, and before Cobb came along in Inception, Matt Damon came and visited him while he was teaching at the university and asked him about, he wanted to pursue his dreams, and he said, I have a real dream for you.
So for like Goodwill Hunting, you mean?
No, Inception.
Oh, Inception.
Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Yeah.
Rabbit trail, indeed.
Yes, definitely a rabbit trail. We can get more into it.
Also, one quick note, a historical note I think that might be worth mentioning, is what brought to mind, first of all, the main character, Cooper, they live on a farm, and in this farm there's a lot of dust. That's emphasized through the film.
Yeah.
But the song Dust Bowl Children by Alison Krauss and Union Station came to mind, which took me to the Dust Bowl happening during the Great Depression in the Great Plains, about in the Midwest or so.
Yeah.
But that actually choked and destroyed crops. So that helps you understand a little more of the dire situation that they were in.
And a much realer sense that, hey, this kind of happened in our history before.
So just another added element of the desperation that they experienced.
Yeah. Interesting. That's a good point. Okay, cool. Well, what are some other things you guys, generally speaking about the film, we can dive into?
Well, one of the biggest things, kind of the movie makes a point, is things that transcend time. And talking about what is time? Is it relative? Is it? We'll get out in a second. But the biggest thing they were talking about was gravity. How gravity transcended time. So, what were your thoughts on what that means, or how does that really apply to?
Well, it's all theoretical. The fifth dimension that we do not fully we don't have access to. We don't have, I would say, we don't have the brain capacity to understand it at this point. And I think it was, it wasn't necessarily that gravity transcends time. It was more like you can send, at least from what I thought of how it was expressed, that gravity could be manipulated to send basically a gravitational signal back through time. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not gravity above time, it's gravity in line with time, but it's able to travel through time, back down the timeline.
As a tool.
Yes, exactly.
For communication.
Which makes sense, considering that we, I don't know if we have any sort of proof that this is the case, at least theoretically, that solar systems and planets in different gravitational situations, within the cosmos, manipulate time. So basically, think of it the way I was explained to it is like, time is basically a giant blanket, and you put a heavy enough mass or a heavy enough mass of matter on there, it's going to influence it. So, for example, our entire solar system, more so than the planets, giant weight in the blanket of time. And so you travel outside of our solar system, and time will become different. It's actually going to be more flatline the further you are away from a solar system or planet. It's going to be more what time truly is. That's kind of the way I understood it, as far as manipulation of gravity and time. So, therefore, because a giant mass of matter with a large gravitational signature sits in the blanket of time, that gravity influences time, therefore proving that gravity can be manipulated throughout time. At least theoretically. A lot of theory thrown into the movie, but very, very well played out.
Just for those who are listening, I hope you're not listening to this podcast at like 8 in the morning. Might be kind of heady.
Or at least not before you've had your coffee.
Right.
So.
Coffee first.
And that's why I have my coffee.
Coffee first, then discussion.
Well, most of them will not be taking place at 12:45 at night, so
right.
Yeah, that's just happened to be tonight.
Well, to that point though, because something I've always wondered, and by any means we're not, I don't know even what field of science we'd be even talking about here, but I've always thought about how is time relative, because like there's the one scene in the movie where they said, hey, every hour we're on this planet, it's the equivalent of 7 years back on Earth. Mm-hmm. And to me, I was always like thinking, well, time is time. How can it possibly be bent and warped? And of course, black hole theories and how time can be smushed and stretched. That's a whole different field. But that was always one thing I was just like, does time change? But again, I don't have all the theories on why that might be the case. But the movies at least opened my me to thinking, okay, could time be somewhat altered? But still, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how time would change, just because I would think time would pass the same amount, regardless of where you're at. But
right. Yeah.
Again, these are.
It's all relative, though.
That's right.
Right, but here's my thing though. If it's all relative, gravity as well would be relative then.
Yeah, relative to the amount of mass you have, or mass you're dealing with.
Well, because for example, planet Earth. The planet Earth is at a certain particular place in the solar system at a particular time. And so when he's doing his manipulating with the gravity of the books, of the dust, that would mean the gravity, I'm just trying to think out loud here, that mean the gravity would be only accurate to if the planet was at this location at this particular time. But it's not.
Not necessarily location. It doesn't have to do with location as much as, again, within a solar system, there's what causes it to be different. So I'm trying to think how to describe it.
Because I do understand that planets do have mass, and therefore the mass, it does actually have its own.
Right.
Like they talk about that in the film a lot, where it has its own gravitational pull, and therefore, the Earth has we have gravity on the Earth because of its particular mass. Jupiter has particular gravity pull because of its mass, because it's larger.
Right, and it was actually they talked about it. It's fairly identical lengths of time. Like time is pretty much identical as far as quantity of time whenever they were in our solar system, when they went through the wormhole and arrived at the other solar system. Time was pretty much the same. It was gargantuan, the black hole, that manipulated time because it was such a huge amount of mass and matter there that caused a distortion of space-time. So it takes a lot to cause that big of a distortion.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm making the argument about how gravity, if time is relative, then I would say gravity would have to be relative as well. That's what I'm making the argument for.
That's what I'm concurring with your point. Gravity is relative because of how large gargantuan was, how huge a gravitational signature it had.
I agree. So I'm saying
it was more relative to time than just a single planet was.
Yeah. So the point I'm throwing out there, and we can move on after this. The point I'm making is the premise of the movie is gravity is consistent, and it is not relative. That's what I'm trying.
I didn't see gravity was consistent because they went to The water planet they went to is 130%.
No, the gravity consistent because he's able to interact with Earth's gravity in the time.
Because within Gargantuan, the time, again, fifth dimension, stuff we don't understand, played out in third dimension, complicated, watch the movie, you'll get it.
Or you won't get it.
Or you won't get it.
That's why we're here.
Get it too, yes.
Because they actually talk about saying how they actually never define who they are. They recognize there is...
No, he did.
Huh?
We know who they are. It was humans. Future humans brought us there.
But you remember though, he brings them to the fifth dimension. This is gonna sound really nerdy. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. This is gonna it's just fun.
And by the
he says they're in the seventh dimension. He said they created they're in the fifth dimension. He said they created a third dimension for us.
Yeah,
and perhaps it could be humans, but he never emphatically said that it was humans.
Yes, they said we brought ourselves here.
He said we brought ourselves here to this point, but he never made the point of. He said we brought ourselves everything that's transpired the whole movie.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert here. Everything that's transpired this whole movie has been Matthew, talking with Murph, his daughter, to bring him to this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cooper. Really.
Now, first of all, hang on.
His actors.
Just so they're not looking for a Matthew through the film.
Yeah.
It's Matthew McConaughey, but in the movie, his name is Cooper.
Yes.
There we go.
Anyway, well, here's the thing, because remember, they put this whole black hole that they designed, this whole manipulation of gravity in the third dimension. So it's basically a third-dimensional interface to interact with the fifth dimension. That's basically what they created for him.
Yes.
And remember, he said that they couldn't pick a single moment in time, and so they couldn't really know how to communicate to her because they couldn't communicate to her specifically because they didn't know her personally, and they could only pick a location. Remember, the location was her room.
He had an infinite amount of time.
Yes, infinite amount of time. That whole capsule encapsulated every single moment of time within that room. So they didn't pick. So all they had to do is get him there, and then he could figure out how to communicate with her because of his relationship with her.
Exactly.
So yes, gravity is relative. It was relative to the timeline that they placed him in to manipulate that gravity.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, this is super nerd level. This is expert mode. So, anyway, we're nerding out here. Okay, so on to a little bit less sciencey stuff. Some things I wanted to point out.
Yes, because gravity brings you down to Earth. Sorry. Anyway,
he has been on a roll with
you got all these puns. This is awesome.
What was the one that just you talked about the tractors? What was it?
Oh yeah,
the tractor beam.
Yes.
That's
There's a scene where all the tractors are drawn. He incorporates some new tech. He kind of stole off an old drone that was being messed up by the gravity that they didn't know about, and it gets all taken. All these tractors he's now souped up with this tech have been drawn to the house. So there's like tractor beams. That was good. That was very funny.
Yep.
Anyway, okay.
By the way, we love puns. So if you have any good puns for us, definitely hit us up on Facebook and jazz.
Yes, please do. Okay, so two things I want to point out real quick. One's just a short little thing, just technical side. I love the camera shots outside, like the truck and the shuttle. That's always kind of like that side downward angle,
like a GoPro.
Well, what it reminds me of is like the old car shots of the tires on old TV shows and movies. Anytime there was a car chase, especially like on the old A-Team show, you would always see every time there was a car chase with gunfire, it was like that shot right down the side. You could see the tire, and the tire would always get shot out. But it just reminded me of those scenes. Like, I love those scenes. And it was just classic. But also the fact that anytime there's a camera shot that's from space, like it's out in space, not inside something with air and oxygen, there's no sound. Maybe music sometimes, but there's no sound whatsoever. And that was great to me because there's no air in space. There is no sound. And it especially I never picked up on it before, but whenever the Endurance has been blown up by Dr. Mann and it's spinning and they finally get back inside, you hear them breathing inside their suits, but once they close off the hatches and oxygen gets released, then the alarms like very slowly fade back in because there's air again. Mm-hmm. So these alarms are going off the entire time, but there was no air in there, and then they come back on. Like every little detail like that was thought through.
Oh, that's true. I love that. Even the way they use scale too.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of using the planets, seeing the full planets.
Yes.
And then the very small,
Very, very
miniature version of it.
And that's still with the ship, like,
Mhm.
hundreds and thousands of miles away off that planet. So,
Yes.
Well, it's also beautiful because you have such a large planet, and the planet is so large, and you know when you zoom into a good wide shot of the ship, still, the planet actually becomes abstract, where you just see colors because it is such a large planet. So it was really fascinating how they incorporated some great cinematography in the film.
one thing I love about everything Christopher Nolan does, he does this thing specifically well, and it can be done a couple of different ways. And usually Christopher Nolan does it one way, but making people love a character to create suspense. I think too many movies, especially the action hero movies and things like just action in general, and tends to go towards the storytelling, creating the suspense, just the situation. But I mean, you think about some of the trying to think. So one of my favorite horror movies, and I've gotten less and less on horror movies lately, but The Conjuring has always been one I've loved because on both movies there is a huge intimate family aspect to it. Like you connect with all these characters and this loving family, and you have a lot of like happy moments. There's not like creep and suspense building through the entire thing. Like in the second movie, there's literally like a 20-minute section where it's like they're singing all together in the house and this whole family moment. It's just like it's beautiful. And it's like there's like all the horror just kind of disappeared in this love of family, and then it comes back in, and you're just like so scared for everybody because you love these characters.
You have a vested interest now.
Yes, and that's one thing I think a lot of movies fail to do and don't spend the time on. But the other thing I love that Christopher Nolan does that makes it easier for people to connect and fall in love with characters is embody one or two ideas or philosophies or whatever you want to call them. Embody characters with one or two elements. So, for example, like Dr. Brand was in this movie was a little bit more Spockish, kind of more logical. She was kind of always thinking the logical safety step. Whereas Cooper was, he definitely dealt in logic, but he had a balance between logic and emotion. He was a little bit more Captain Kirkish. Kind of, whenever he was, the Endurance blew up and it was spinning, he's like, what are you doing? Docking. it's like
that's impossible.
It's like it's necessary,
but necessary.
It's like
yes, a great line.
It's
impossible,
so
but necessary.
Yes.
The only exception I would think of would be her relationship to Edmonds.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
But other than that, yes.
Yeah, and there's definitely a balance between everybody, but yeah, just how kind of a lot of Nolan's characters. I think there's even more of it in Inception, but in that movie. But overall, Nolan has a really good job of embodying characters with one or two different elements, and that makes you allowed to connect.
That part of you connects with that person.
Yeah, that part of you connects with that person, and then the other character you connect with that one. If you can relate human elements that we relate to, embody them in multiple characters, it is so quick and easy to just latch onto the character.
Yeah. Real quick, can you read that quote that you found earlier?
Yeah. Let's see, right here.
We don't know if this is this Scott? I don't know. If
I think this is inscribed on a column somewhere.
So kind of just to give you a picture here, the column it's a column. It's a column. So obviously it has 4 different sides, and so there's one side and there's another side. So go ahead and read.
Okay, yeah. So you're looking at 2 sides of a column. If you're looking at one side, this is what it reads. Art is pointless. You have to go out, get an actual job, and make a living. You can't just let the rest of your life be a joke, a failure. You will end up a starving artist, contribute to society instead of wasting time. You're worthless. But if you stand at the corner of this column and you see that side we just read combined with the other side of it, it creates something entirely different. So you read it at the same time. Art is pointless without passion. You have to go out and create art. Get an actual job doing what you love, and make a living by being yourself. You can't just let other people define the rest of your life and say you will be a joke, a failure. Follow your heart. You will end up happy and free, not a starving artist. Love your art and contribute to society by inspiring people instead of wasting time letting others tell you you're worthless. You can change the world. So it's just really cool to see both sides. And you made a good point, too, that you can read that side where it's like all logical, the first one.
Which you can be very logical, and yet there's no purpose, it seems, to living life just by living pure like Spock.
Yeah. There's no life to it.
There's no life to it. You kind of have to kill a part of yourself. But then,
yeah. Well, and then the others, if you read just the other side by itself, there's a few pieces that kind of fit together, but it doesn't really make sense. There's not a they don't all there's not cohesiveness. They don't all connect together. But if you have a balance between the logical side and the emotional side, it blends into something that's like it gives you drive, it gives you passion, but it gives you a logical plan as well. So combine that and you got it going on.
Well, we'll post the image on the
Facebook I'll make sure I save that. Anyway,
on your note on family, that's a great one to touch on a simple level in the film as well. How it was used to really make you connect, especially with the father-daughter relationship. There was a great significance there. But also you see the pain of the distance between them and the way that those special moments that are enjoyed in the moment in fatherhood and motherhood are in some ways stripped away from him. And so he's seeing it at a distance now, and he sees the years go by from a distance. He has no control over it. He can't hold his hands out and have the grandchild there to enjoy. So it's also very significant in just in the way a family grows and develops and being there in the moment to enjoy them.
There was actually
I suffer with them even because I think he feels terrible because he made a great point. I'm sorry, I
gotta find my note here anyway.
He made a great point though, where he said, talking with who was Anne Hathaway's character in the movie.
Dr. Brand.
Dr. Brand.
Yeah.
He's talking with her because she had just lost one of the astronauts that she's in love with. He's talking with her because she had made a mistake and it cost one guy's life and it cost them 23 years worth of Earth time. And he made the comment of telling her, saying, when you're a parent, you'll understand that the thing more than anything, you want to make the world, you want to make things feel safe for your kids. And I think that's what he's feeling more than anything else, is he's seeing his kids at a distance and knowing, I can't do anything. I can't even tell them I can't do anything. He's just having to watch them live their life, the joys and even the pains, because his son loses his kid. And he feels heartbroken, and he's heartbroken that his daughter is so very angry with him, which I want to definitely hit that point later. Very angry with them and saying, hey, you left when you were I'm now your age. I just had my birthday, so it'd be a really good time for you to come back because that's kind of a promise that he made her, which he's not going to keep. But just suffering with people, I think that's one thing that makes us human, is we love people, we celebrate with people, but we also, and that's what we're called to do, is we're also supposed to suffer with them, empathize with them, relate with them. And I feel like we're missing a lot of that in our world today, where we're so wrapped up in our own little worlds with our smartphones and our own problems that we forget that, hey, someone might need an encouraging word from you today, or just your presence. You know?
It's funny. I actually found there's actually two instances of a lot of irony whenever Dr. Mann was talking. Oh, it's great. Dr. Mann talked about what does science tell us? What does research tell us? Who you're going to see before you die?
And real
your
quick,
children.
Dr. Mann is one of the astronauts they go to save, which is Matt Damon's character. Continue.
Yeah, he's also a coward.
We'll get that later.
Yeah, we'll get that. I want to rip that one up on him. But anyway, okay. So it's as he's about to try to kill Cooper, Dr. Mann tells Cooper that research says the last thing you're going to see before you die is the face of your children. Your brain's going to fight a little bit harder to try to survive, and you have that father survival instinct. You're going to fight for your kids, and it's kind of ironic that. So this is what I wrote down. It's ironic that Mann said he'd see that Cooper'd see his kids before he died, and Cooper saw his daughter before he thought he was going to die in the black hole. But she actually ended up saving his life. And it's kind of ironic that the roles reverse, where Murph, whenever she's old and bedridden and everything, but she finds out that her dad's been found outside the wormhole, and so she pushes herself harder. Like, you know, they said that she's in no condition to actually travel from one station to the next, but she did it anyway. She pushed harder to see her father. So it kind of reversed a little bit, whereas it was talking about father pushing harder to see his daughter, and it kind of reversed, daughter pushing harder to see her father. I just thought that was really cool. I mean, it's definitely sweet.
Because it really plays back in the whole love thing, how
it is quantifiable.
Love conquers all here, how that does push you to do insane things and to go distances you didn't think you could reach, but because it's that love you have for somebody else, it'll drive you, it'll push you.
Yeah.
And that Dr. Brand mentioned that about love not really belonging to us, about it something mysterious and yet familiar.
Yeah.
I was going to touch on that too, in fact, because in one of the, I guess you could say the climax, where he's moving into the other dimensions, or the the fifth dimension?
Yeah.
Well, the third dimension that the fifth dimension people made.
So complicated.
But when he moved into that, there's a great spiritual theme there, especially if you see it from the lens of Scripture, because there you see a foreign, familiar sense of the way God views us. Because for him, Christ speaks of, or Scripture speaks of how God is intimate with us, but also someone who is above us and someone who is in heaven, but also with us. And so, in that sense, you see something foreign and yet also familiar. A God we don't fully understand, and yet a God who is also very familiar to us.
Yeah.
And so you could almost see it on the other side, where you have a desperate Cooper trying to communicate with his daughter. Instead, what we have is someone with a master plan on the other side, who knows how to communicate, yet knowing that we won't understand the Morse code, you might say, immediately, and yet he still patiently continues to drive into us.
I want to draw from that, and I'm going to this is going to take a little bit of explaining, but I want to draw two arcs here, all right? So, there's a conversation they kind of have that the movie speaks of, talking about, you can kind of see where they're talking about love being the evolutionary step, or is it viewing, how do I describe this? What's driving this team of astronauts? And Dr. Mann speaks of thinking of evolution hasn't surpassed the human brain's part to function as thinking humans as a species, thinking of us as a global network of humans, or a global community, you might say. Evolution hasn't gotten us to that point where we think as a global community. Of course, this whole movie is talking from an evolutionary standpoint. We're coming from creation side personally, but I'm going to speak in terms of the movie. On an evolutionary scale, we as humans don't think of humans as a species, as a grand scale. We think of maybe maximum as a country. Typically, that's as far as we think when it comes to fighting for things. But then Cooper is, and most everyone in this movie, other than really sort of Dr. Mann, he fights for himself though, but and Dr. Brand, he thinks of humans as a species. He was forgoing his humanity and lying to try to save the human race. But everyone else, especially Cooper, is fighting for his family, which you see, that's what actually makes him win. So you actually disproves that the best thing is fighting for what you love, not for the species.
For the greater good, the betterment of all mankind.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things you can try to get away with because it's for the good of all mankind.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of excuse to be made there, and man makes those excuses.
Right.
As Dr. Mann, which man in general also does.
Man in the movie sense.
Yes. But here's the arc I wanted to draw, because you touched on Christianity and everything. So there are maybe 5 reasons that people die other than natural death or disease, something like that. Outside of those, as far as what you die for, there's dying for survival for yourself. There's dying for protecting others, which is kind of ties into one of the other ones. But then there's dying for religion or affiliation. So dying for a country or your
cause.
Yeah, your cause or country, that can be kind of blended together.
Mm-hmm.
Dying for promise of future reward, that's more of a religious sense, and then dying for love, for what you love, which, these can all kind of be blended together. So, dying for country, you love the country. But one thing I'd like to point out is that Christianity has been the most persecuted religion throughout all of history. Logically, that does not make sense, because you can argue about the Catholic Church and how you want to quantify that as being, biblically Christian model. I don't personally believe that the Catholic Church follows a full Christian model and believes necessarily what the Bible teaches fully. In a lot of the important senses, it teaches more about works. And that kind of plays into dying for future reward, because Islam teaches the same thing. It's not a love for your God. It's a promise of reward if you die fighting for your God, or if you work and obey your God till death. It's a promise of reward. Whereas Christ, with us being Christians, we are persecuted and have died in the fight for what we love. We love our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Well, I would actually just quickly
keep going.
Slightly disagree. I know a lot of Muslims actually would love the God of the Quran. The problem is, though, the God of Quran is not personal like Jesus Christ.
Sure.
God is not in God's nature to come and take on sinful man and dwell with mankind. God is God.
Yeah.
He's God doesn't come down to you and meet you where you're at. You go up to God.
Yeah.
You achieve righteousness and holiness, and so therefore there's this holiness that the Muslims will love about God, but they don't. But there's no mercy, there's no grace there.
Yeah.
And I love that passage. I think it's figure out what the verse is where it says it's God's kindness, it's His mercy and grace that leads us to repentance. It's not this. You have to live up to my standard. You have to live up to. Yeah, you're going to fall short of the glory of God. You're going to fall short of my standard, but I have provided a way for you to, for us to be together. And it's on my merit of righteousness, not yours. So, just wanted to...
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, Jesus Christ is the only God that has ever come and died for His people. And the people and His people that He died for are the ones that killed Him. It's you cannot beat that level of love. And I think that's also a problem in a lot of, if you want to bring this over to a little bit about relationships, you can't expect perfection out of someone or out of any loved one. No matter the relationship, you can't expect perfection or it's going to fail. And Christ does not expect perfection.
We do expect perfection out of relationships.
Mm-hmm. We do, and that's where they fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lower your standards, everybody. You'll find love. That's the whole moral here. So, no, not the point, but still, like that is.
Well, we demand perfect love from people because it's like, oh, you didn't say this. We get in a fuss because people didn't say something. They might have said the right thing, but in the wrong way. Like you didn't. And I mean, I'm not discounting that's part of our humanity, and there's ways we need to. That's part of love. It's like, how do we, in the midst of our brokenness, how beautiful is it? Like. How beautiful it is that's like, I'm a mess, you're a mess, but in the midst of this chaotic mess we call living life, I'm going to find a way to connect and love with this person. And there's some kind of interesting beauty in that.
Yeah. The balance that we have to find is, does this person actually love me back? Is there a mutual love relationship there? Obviously, we both wrong each other on a very regular basis, and I believe that is what God will judge us by. It's not, how much did you show other people that you loved me and all this stuff? It's not, yes, there's a degree of that, but was there actually did you time and time again prove that you loved me? I know you have disobeyed me, you have wronged me, but did you show, or do you actually love me? Is there a mutual, because God will love us no matter what, we know this, but we have to love Him back, and that will show in fruits of our life. Whereas, we have in our human relationships, you have to see it's showing love and saying that we're not expecting perfection. You can't expect perfection. Doesn't excuse the other person if they don't actually love you. You have to be careful of that. There's a balance to look for there. It's like, okay, does this person's actions in life represent their love for me, and also look at yourself. Do my actions represent that I actually love them? Is that mutual? And so if that's true, then there shouldn't be huge, giant problems necessarily between loving partners as far as, cheating on somebody. That's definitely not a showcase of love or anything. You can't say like, oh, but he still loves me, it's just a mistake, or vice versa. You can't do that. But
and we're really getting on a tangent here, but I think it's worth saying. I was listening on the radio the other day, and someone was saying how I've enjoyed country music, but he said they've listened to a lot of country music, but just music in general. We don't have a lot of, quote, love songs. We say they're love songs, but they're really a lot of lust songs. Because love has to do with caring for another person and for their betterment. Lust has to do with how does this better me? And that's the whole issue with pornography, is it gives me a feeling. And the idea is, I love her body, she makes me feel this way, and, I love this about, it's all about how she makes me feel. And it's like, so what happens when that feeling is gone? It really had nothing to do with her. That really wasn't love, that was lust. And so I was like, it's interesting. We have a lot of lust songs going around, not a lot of love songs.
And I think you can take it a step further. It's not just sexual lust, it's emotional lust.
No. Yeah, but that's definitely one of the ways it's...
Yeah, when we look for partners, we're often...
I agree,
Yeah, we're looking for what fills my needs, and will this person fulfill them long term? That's the answer we're looking for. It's not, can I fulfill this person's needs? And if it's like a constant Christmas. What can I give to the other person, and vice versa? That type of relationship, that's going to keep going and going.
My favorite, thing like You Complete Me is The Dark Knight. The Joker's talking with Batman. He's like, you complete me.
That's actually scary accurate to the voice too. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did. Yeah, there it is.
That was Leslie as well.
The voice. Yeah. That's actually pretty good. That's like the new Justice League Batman.
You want to know my secret identity?
Why?
Because I'm Batman.
There it is.
Okay.
So we've talked about love. We've talked about gravity, and
the gravity of love.
The gravity of love is a very serious thing.
Why so serious?
Had to be done.
Yes. Sorry, I'm
You're good.
here.
You're good.
One thing we were going to talk about Dr. Mann, Matt Damon's character, and I know you really want to tell on the subject of cowardness, but before we do
and
that,
a few others,
before we do that, on a kind of lighter note, someone had done. I'll give credit. This is E! News. Someone had done a markup of how much money has humanity spent to save Matt Damon. Because if you think about it, we've saved him. Let me see what the number was. Let's see. Courage Under Fire, Saving Private Ryan, Titan AE, Green Zone, Elysium, Interstellar, and The Martian.
Titan AE, wow.
Yeah, I was. So we've spent a lot of money trying to save Matt Damon, and so when you culminate what all these attempts to save this particular man, apparently the greatest man of us all, it's about $900 billion going to save Matt Damon.
Oh, man. Hope he's worth it.
Yeah, apparently. So, and they actually didn't even include the Bourne series. I mean, who knows how much...
Well, he was taking care of himself there, but he did kill a lot of people.
Well, they were trying to get him, so they were trying to hunt them down. In the meantime, people were dying. There was well, that wasn't the government, but I mean, they were hunting down Jason Bourne's character.
Yeah. But he usually saved himself, so maybe he could account for the cost of the guns and the bullets. Which ain't much in this.
Right, but hiring contractors, trying to spend the months trying to find this guy.
Well, that's more how much we spent trying to kill him, though.
Well, they're still trying to get him.
Okay.
Kill him, get him. I mean, okay.
Okay.
That's good. That's great.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Adam's like, I'm not interested in this conversation
No.
anymore. Let's move on to more important things.
Okay, so one thing that I loved about Dr. Mann.
Just imagine how much money we'd have saved from the deficit if we didn't save Matt Damon.
We could have built the Death Star at this point.
We could have.
Okay,
we'll move on.
Or at least
just throwing that out there.
Okay, so I thought this was really cool, and I think this speaks into the Bible, but you know how Dr. Mann, he speaks like he's so knowledgeable, and he sounds very knowledgeable. He's very captivating in how he speaks. Even Cooper is kind of infatuated with some of the words he's saying while they're walking, and even as though Dr. Man's about to kill him, or attempt to. So what I wrote down is Dr. Man speaks as one who is wise, but a wise man knows he's a fool. And so this entire time, Dr. Man sings like, I'm doing this the right thing. Yes, I admit that I'm a coward, and I'm wise for knowing that. Like, that's how he acts. Like, I know my problems are, and so I'm going to operate with them, but the fact that I know it and can admit it makes me wise. Very, very prideful. That he's not man enough to admit that he's wrong. That's a very B-level pun, but hey, it's a pun. So, but I thought that was very interesting because the Bible speaks to that multiple times in Proverbs.
Because it's interesting because like he says you're a coward, and usually we'd be very defensive, like no, I'm not, and in a very eerie way, he's like yes, yes. Yes, and he's kind of, I don't know if he's accepted that he's a coward, but I
think so.
I think
he's accepted the
Yeah.
fact that he's like, the mission's all that matters now anymore, and basically, like, my life doesn't mean anything, your life doesn't mean anything, and kind of you were talking about this earlier, how love for people, or survival for humanity, man's approach was, we need to save the human race, and essentially that cost him his life, and almost, Cooper, and
Everybody else.
Everyone else's life. So he really didn't have a love for humanity or people. It was just like, hey, we need to save the human race. Cooper, on the other hand, he had a love for his family. And so I think that's the thing about love is love is not something that is impersonal. It has to be personal. We can love, and I think that's why loving the human race is so difficult because it's like, it is so...
We're pretty screwed up.
Yeah, it is so impersonal. It's hard to love a country, a civilization, a nation. I mean, you can say you love Tennessee, but that can only go so far. Just the state. I mean, it really has to get down to who do you have personal relationship with. These are the people that you love, because love requires knowledge, intimacy, of knowing who this person is, quirks and all. And so I think that's the big difference is the survival, survival's not enough. That's why the love was thrown in there saying, hey, this is what's going to get you through. Yeah. And ironically, man did not have that. He's saying like, your love for your kids is what's going to push you through there. Yeah. And he's like, I've been tested, and I think he had completely let go of that love, and that's kind of what actually destroyed him, was he didn't have that drive.
Well, and this is slowly touching on that,
Slowly touching.
Or lightly touching, sorry.
There we go.
Not slowly.
I was just thinking. Anyway.
Falling slowly. This is what I wrote down. We relate to Dr. Man because we feel his loneliness and fear. And I think he is an example of what happens to us when we ourselves are our only source of thought and conversation, when we're not challenged by other people on a regular basis, which is why it's so important to have good relationships. Both, friendships, marriage, kids, we need to constantly be challenging each other. You need to have someone challenging you and you challenging somebody else. It needs to be, just like a whole system passing one person on to the next. And also, embracing conversations from outside viewpoints. I mean, like, we kind of all agree on things. We tend to have good conversation. I think we do challenge each other. But it's important for us to have conversation with people who have polar opposite views from us. And that's one thing we will have, guys. We will have guests on. We're going to try to have them on a regular basis. We're 3 conservative Christian young men, and so we'd like to get a lot of different viewpoints involved in here because all of our viewpoints tend to come from the same perspective. So we would definitely want to reach out to
because at the end of the day, our heart's desire is not because we're trying to get an agenda across. We're just 3 young men talking about how do we live this thing called life and do this well. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of danger when it comes to being just around all like-minded people that, we have our us and them mentality, and that's not what our heart is. Our heart is we want to love people for who they are, even though they're different from us, and especially if they're different from us. There's so many great things I can learn from people who are nothing like me, and I've been meeting a lot of at my job, just a lot of Hispanic people lately, and just the I don't speak hardly any Spanish, but just it's given me this desire to speak. It's like, you know, you're gonna have thoughts and stuff and personality and cultural heritage that I know nothing about, but I'm gonna be so enriched by getting to, you know, hear your story eventually. So
yeah,
that's our heart's desires.
I need to go back and learn Spanish. I used to be decent at it, but it's been a long time. I really want to learn sign language. Like that's a big thing on my bucket list, just because it's kind of like a cool irony almost to being able to speak with those who don't necessarily have a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we could keep each other accountable in that too, because I'm learning it too.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah,
deal.
So we'll have one podcast completely in sign language. Is that what you're saying? That'd be kind of hard for those of you who just listening. You'll be very quiet.
You know what'll happen though? Whenever we think you're saying something stupid, he and I will just kind of do our thing.
Yes.
I was like, what did he say? What did he say?
Yes.
Anyway, so. Well, what other points do you guys have? I'm out actually.
He's out.
I'm surprised I'm out. I had a long list, but we touched on everything pretty much. Well, we kind of touched on exploration versus caretaking and logic and emotion. We kind of touched that.
Yes.
The last
one thing I wanted to touch on, let's see, desperation. Actually, I wanted to say a quote and then kind of touch on one last point if you guys have nothing else. One thing I thought was interesting about man's situation is how detached he became from humanity. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is, we generally change, I forget, it's by Jim Rohn, we generally change for one of two reasons, inspiration or desperation. I'll say it again. So we generally change for one of two reasons, inspiration or desperation. If your situation has not changed, you either have not been inspired enough to aspire to something better, or you're not desperate enough to change things.
Which out of those do you think is better?
I'd say inspiration.
Really?
I would say desperation it's more of a necessity that you have to change, otherwise you face, literally in their case, extinction.
I think desperation will lead to inspiration on a greater scale, though. Because you think about it, if you're inspired 100% of your life, you're not going to be as challenged hypothetically.
Well,
you're going to be as kicked around and beat up, and you're not going to get as strong from it. Yes, you might succeed, but if you come from a desperate standpoint where you've been beaten up, you have a harder shell, you know how things are going to work. You're more street smart about it too. Then your inspiration comes on top of that. You have a much stronger foundation to build that inspiration on.
And I'll look at inspiration this way now, but I totally understand where you're coming from. I guess when I'm saying inspiration, not that like, oh, I'm going to only write when I feel inspired.
Oh, okay.
In that case, you're never going to write. I forget who once said this, but he says, one man said, I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, that always happens at 9 o'clock every morning. The idea was like, I'm inspired by the fact that this is who I want to be. Like I'm striving for some goal, and so I'm inspired to work towards that. So it's not that I'm going to work when I just feel like it. It's I'm working towards something. Desperation is I'm working away from something. I'm working away from starvation. I'm working away from poverty. I'm working away from, inspiration would be like, hey, I want to get that brand new car, or I want to, be able to provide this great living for my family. Yeah, so both kind of can happen at the same time, but that's what I'm saying about inspiration. But so I love that quote, and I don't want it to sound morbid in this particular case. So it's a good quote.
Yeah, definitely is a good one.
But in this particular situation, though, in Dr. Mann's situation, I feel like his was more desperation, where he had he'd given up hope that no one was going to come to and he was so desperate that he completely lied about his research. Yeah. Being a coward, being self-centered, he's lied about this research, realizing that, hey, no one's probably going to come for me, so I'm going to falsify my research and basically put other people's lives in danger just to save my own.
Yeah. And if you look, he was using odds to justify his acts. He was saying, 50%.
the best odds
I've had in forever.
I just actually realized too.
It's so morbid, but so true.
He is a huge hypocrite too, because remember, you had whenever they were in his station on the planet, they were talking about, or when the father, Dr. Brand, had just passed away, and they found out it was all a lie.
Sorry.
Michael
keep going.
Caine, anyway, yeah. So he was talking about, it's like, Yeah, evolution hasn't surpassed the ability for us to think of humanity as a species. Like, we have to get to that point. But, and so Dr. Brand was actually willing to sacrifice his humanity, blah, blah, blah. Just talking about the human species as a whole, like how brave Dr. Brand was, and, he was willing to sacrifice such and such. And then he risks all of the entire human species just so he could be saved.
Interesting.
So he loved to talk about, it's like, oh yes, that's such a good thing. Makes me feel good to talk about it as it's like me and Dr. Brand were in cahoots, and we were right. We're the next step of evolution. We think of humanity as a species, and he's a hypocrite because he just sacrificed all of humanity to save himself.
Because I think he realized that we are the future. Like he's completely left the humanity behind, saying like, hey, we're going to start this new colony, and he is a hypocrite.
Yeah, you could almost say he was seeking after a more synthetic, maybe less organic kind of way of approaching the world. In terms of this is something that is now conditioned that we can move forward with.
Yeah.
Maybe more of in a scientific fashion, rather than considering the organic, the world that we were built up from.
Yeah.
If you take Scripture, of course, we were built up from the ground, the way the Lord made us, the way He formed us.
From the dust we have fallen, from to the dust we shall return.
Can't wonder. You wonder if that was used for a particular purpose for the dust.
Oh yeah,
hey, man.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because either you or you made the comment about how coincidental. Maybe it's not coincidental. It's probably a good choice. But his name is Man. In fact, that maybe the reason why his name is Man because man is faulty.
Yeah, he's very flawed.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I told you guys before, but did you guys know about the what sparked the creation of the theme for this movie? Did I tell you guys about that?
Hans Zimmer's theme?
Yeah, Hans Zimmer's theme for Interstellar.
No.
Okay, so I believe this story is accurate. Before the movie came out in theaters, this is what I read about it. All right, so I'm operating on the assumption that this is all true. So, but this is how I read it in an article. So Hans Zimmer and Christopher Nolan, they're like best buds. So they were like out to lunch or coffee or something. They were talking about their kids and growing up, going off to school and college and all that stuff. And Christopher Nolan, after this conversation, asked Hans Zimmer, like, hey, can you write just like a quick theme based on just what we've been talking about our kids growing up and our families and everything? Just come up with something. It's like, sure. Like, a week later or so, comes back with a short theme. It's like, okay, I'm using this in my next sci-fi film. It's like the entire manipulation of it was just a conversation to make sure that it was, from start to finish, it was a family-focused sci-fi film. Which it's I hate to even call it sci-fi because it's not lasers and lightsabers and all these space explosions and all this stuff. But technically it is sci-fi, but it's based on a lot of
good science fiction spawns from good science. So,
true.
But this is kind of science.
It's not Star Trek.
It's
Star
kind
Wars.
of an intermediate step where it's science theory, where it's kind of like, if we were to take things to their, as far as we understand it, this would be science theory. In a sense, it's kind of faith because it's like, hey, this is what we believe with the current evidence. This is pointing in this direction there. So,
but yeah, just the entire focus of the movie and drive for it from start to finish was, I want this movie, the story to be driven by the love between a father and daughter, or just between a family. That's what I want to drive this entire storyline, and it worked out so well.
Yeah.
Very, very well. Yeah. Definitely one of his best works.
And I think Murph's character is interesting because I actually mentioned about giving up hope, and that's the other one I wanted to mention was Man had given up hope, and you can see how Cooper's son was he loved his dad, but you can see how he let go of him, and finally his son gives up all hope to where he's willing to die and have his own family die in this house that's completely infested with dust and everyone's completely sick. Murph, on the other hand, she has been furious with her dad ever since the day he left. And you would think that would be, it's interesting, you'd think that's a sign of hatred, but that's a sign of passion in that she still loves her dad. And you can see how she has been so stubborn that she has refused to stop loving her dad, and she still has held on to this hope all this time, to where she was ready she was ready for that. So I think that's, I'm feeling that out in my own life where things are uncertain. We're all feeling that where things are uncertain, and it'd be easier just to give up hope and thinking that things are going to get better, but it's like you just hang in there a little bit longer.
Well,
and things will change.
It reminds me of like they've semi-discovered, that anger and love are like right next to each other in the human brain. Like they're right there with each other. They're intertwined. So the fact that you could not be angry at somebody and let them go implies that you didn't love them, or at least no longer do. At least not on the same level.
Yeah, because anger kind of is anger in our own humanness, it is a feeling of injustice.
Yes.
Now that injustice may be, but that injustice may be incorrect, because sometimes we get angry at the stupidest things and we take revenge, but there's a sense of there's an injustice here done, and it needs to be made right. Yeah,
well, it's a sense of hurt, and in this scenario, you can only be hurt by those you care for and love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, any other points you guys want to point out before we close? So I sound like a pastor. It's like, before we close, and 30 minutes later. All right, now let's close.
No, I don't have anything else.
I guess one thought I also want to point out was man's on the planet, where after he basically hits Cooper's helmet and Cooper's basically left to die, man looks at him, and saying, yeah, I am a coward. He says, don't judge me, Cooper. I wasn't, you weren't tested like I was. And there's something, you can see man's point of view where I've gone through hell and back again, and the isolation and loneliness. You don't know what it's like, and it's kind of hard to talk with people when you've gone through such horrific circumstances, to be like, I can't prescribe your level of morality because you don't know what I've been through. But to that point, though, I was just going to say that it's hard to love people without judging someone where they're at, because we have our own perspective, about how we live our life, and like, oh, that's wrong, or how do we engage with that? But it's still like, how do you care for people, even though you'll be so different on your perspective on things. I mean, I don't know what you guys think about that particular point.
Well, here's my thought, and I forgot to write it down, but I'm glad you brought it up because it brought it back.
Nice.
Whenever someone, seriously, people say it jokingly, but whenever someone seriously says, hey, don't judge me, don't say another word, because all that means is that they're judging themselves already. They know what they've done. So when he says, he's like, don't judge me, Cooper, it's like, yeah, I don't have to. You're miserable enough as it is. You know what you're guilty of, so you're going to have to live with it, suffer with it, or figure out how to fix it yourself.
That's true.
So, you're not worth my time. And just the fact that someone would seriously say, hey, don't judge me. It's like, it just shows so much pride. It's like they're not willing to concede they're wrong. You can just, from there, it's just not worth having any sort of conversation, because it just implies that, listen, anything I say to debate you, just even have a conversation with you with opposing viewpoints, it's like, it's not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to be challenged. I'm going to be annoyed. So I'm not going to waste my time.
Yeah. But see, at that point, like, while I don't want to empathize, like, I understand where a man's coming from, but he says, don't judge me. It's like kind of to your point where it's like, okay, if you're saying that, you obviously feel a sense of guilt, the fact that he's like, don't judge me. I feel bad as is. I'm trying to do away with that bad feeling. But at the same time, though, it's kind of like, let me empathize you. What's your perspective on this? What's it like to walk a mile in your shoes? And hopefully you'll walk a mile in my shoes, and then before we can have an honest conversation about.
You might say Dr. Mann has lost that love and feeling.
Yes, there it is.
It's way too late.
Right.
Anyway.
But definitely a good movie, good family
movie.
Themes, amazing score. Definitely not a science fiction score at the least, but it is so beautifully done, especially as we mentioned, the moments of silence. They just carry so much weight that they're so almost deafening.
Oh yeah,
those
like
moments of silence.
When the music is like one of my favorite moments. So, okay, last thing I'll say here, whenever Cooper's come back from the water planet, it's been 23 years, and he's looking at all the messages, and then his son's messages finish up, and he said he's gone. Like, the music has slowly built up in the background, the moment that message ends, everything goes silent. I was just like,
Yes.
it's just like gut wrenching because his son just said, "All right, I'm letting you go, Dad. Bye."
Yeah.
After he already said that there were just 2 deaths. He lost his first granddaughter and he lost his dad. And it's like, and now my son is letting me go and giving up on me. Okay, so it's like,
it made you feel isolated.
oh,
didn't it?
very, very
Yeah.
isolated. So
Yeah, that was well done. Agreed.
yes. Anyway,
All right.
well, thank you, Christopher Nolan, Hans Zimmer, Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway. You 4 are awesome. Made my favorite movie in the world. So
Matt
And
Damon's
everybody
in
in
there.
the credits. who
Matt Damon's in there
contributed.
too.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
of course.
I honestly though, when it comes to sci-fi, I got to give him The Martian. Oh, that is awesome. That is one of the best.
Another day.
Yeah, another day. Anyway, all right, guys. Well, thank you for those who watched. I know it's late, but thank you, and we'll be doing this. Try to do this on a weekly basis, just one episode. Usually hour-long conversations, but we try to keep it to. But yeah, let us know your comments if you have suggestions on movies for the future that you think would be good.
Absolutely, yes.
We try to stay somewhat relevant, and then we'll hop back to movies way back in the past and things like that on a regular basis. We try to keep a good variety, but so yeah, this has been Cinematic Rabbit Trails. Check out our website as well, cinematicrabbittrails.com, and we'll be posting everything there too. So I'm Jerry Andrew.
I'm David Leffler.
I'm Adam Rice.
And you guys sleep well. Have a good night.
See you guys later.